pro-life setback. The Supreme Court blocks a law aimed at protecting the unborn in Louisiana. Fireworks at the Capitol. The acting Attorney General gives tense testimony to Democratic lawmakers over his relationship with the president. McCarrick decision. Sources say the Vatican is moving forward on the fate of the disgraced former cardinal, when we could know the outcome. And National Marriage Week. We hear about an initiative aimed at celebrating the sacrament of matrimony. On EWTN News Nightly for Friday, February 8th, 2019. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you for joining us for News from a Catholic Perspective. I'm Wyatt Goolsby, in for Lauren Ashburn. The Supreme Court stops a Louisiana pro-life law for now. The state law would require abortion doctors to have hospital admitting privileges, but Chief Justice John Roberts makes the deciding vote 5-4 to put a hold on enforcing it. Correspondent Jason Calvi is outside the court to tell us what's at stake. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Wyatt. Abortion providers in Louisiana say the law would have closed clinics and only 2 abortion doctors would have met its requirements. Now, an appeals court rejected those claims and said doctors hadn't tried hard enough to get admitting privileges in nearby hospitals, but now the Supreme Court intervenes and this law is on hold.
Louisiana Republican Mike Johnson previously was the lawyer who defended the state abortion law.
The idea that a doctor who is performing invasive surgical procedures should need admitting privileges to a hospital within 30 miles is not an unreasonable restriction. It is directly related to women's health, and that's why that law was passed by the Louisiana legislature by an overwhelming landslide, bipartisan majority. It's not a controversial notion at all.
But the law is controversial to the House's pro-choice caucus co-chair. Representative Diane DeGette writes, it also serves as a reminder that our fight against draconian restrictions on abortion rights is still far from over. And Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky calls it a law that will make abortion access all but extinct in Louisiana. The law was scheduled to go into effect this week, but last night the High Court decided to temporarily block it.
I think it's absolutely the wrong decision. Look, the reality is that whether folks are pro-life or pro-choice, you often hear people talk about the health of the mother, and that's what this is about. These are doctors that are performing surgeries.
President Trump's 2 high court picks were among the 4 conservative members who would have allowed the law to take effect.
We should not have the courts intervening here and telling the state of Louisiana with such a strong, overwhelming, bipartisan vote in our legislature, telling our state that we can't do this.
The state had offered to give abortion doctors more time to get those admitting privileges, but that was actually mentioned by Justice Kavanaugh in his dissent. He said if the doctors were at that point rejected, they could go back to court. Now, Senator Patty Murray, a Democrat from Washington State, says this is Justice Kavanaugh attacking Roe v. Wade. The Supreme Court this spring could decide whether to pick up and hear this case. If they don't, the law goes into effect.
So many implications as a result of this case. All right, Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi. Thanks, Jason. Acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker says he has not interfered in the ongoing Russia probe. That federal investigation is examining possible coordination between the 2016 Trump campaign and Russia. Whitaker faced tough questions today on Capitol Hill as President Trump vented about the investigation. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Wyatt. The White House wasn't very pleased with the Democratic-led House Judiciary Committee today. The president's acting attorney general previously came under fire for criticizing the Russia probe, and today Matt Whitaker was questioned about his oversight of that investigation. And now it's looking like President Trump can expect even more investigations after special counsel Robert Mueller finishes his work.
It is all a giant and illegal hoax. President Trump's defiant tweet today didn't keep Democrats from quizzing acting attorney general Matthew Whitaker. They want to know what he shared with President Trump about the Russia investigation.
Have you communicated anything you learned in that briefing about the investigation to President Trump? Yes or no?
I do not intend today to talk about my private conversations with the President of the United States. But to answer your question, I have not talked to the President of the United States about the special counsel's investigation.
Today, the White House blasted the Democratic chair of the House Judiciary Committee.
Chairman Nadler tried to force private conversations to be public information when he knows those are protected by law. And so it's very clear early on that Democrats are focused on playing petty political games.
Other Republicans called today's hearing political theater.
We're going to have plenty of theatrics, Bring your popcorn. I'm thinking about maybe we just set up a popcorn machine in the back, because that's what this is becoming.
But as Robert Mueller's Russia probe is expected to wind down, some Democrats still want to fire up new investigations aimed at the president's administration, business dealings, and personal life.
It's called presidential harassment.
Democratic Representative Eric Swalwell tweets, "No matter how much the president rages with all caps tweets, we will not stop investigating until we know the truth." The GOP might be afraid of Donald Trump, but Democrats aren't.
As for Acting Attorney General Matt Whitaker, he is likely in his final days as the country's chief law enforcement officer. The Senate plans to vote as soon as next week on the president's nominee for AG William Barr. Wyatt?
White House correspondent Mark Irons reporting. Thanks, Mark. The longest-serving member of Congress has died. Colleagues remember Michigan Democrat John Dingell as a war veteran, a fighter for the people of the United States.
He worked for the advancement of his fellow veterans and their care and benefits in peacetime. And he fought all of his life for fairness and opportunity for all.
Dingell, who was Catholic, served on Capitol Hill for more than 59 years before retiring in 2014. He was replaced by his wife, Debbie. An avid sportsman and hunter, he also loved classical music. His funeral will be at a Catholic church outside Detroit. Right up until the end, John Dingell wouldn't go down without a fight or a tweet. Dingell boasted more than 250,000 followers on the account he started in 2010. He would tweet about politics, President Trump, and even the partial government shutdown. Tweets also were common about sports, particularly Dingell's beloved Detroit pro teams and the University of Michigan. His final tweet, coming the day before he passed away, referenced his wife. "The lovely Deborah is insisting I rest and stay off here, but after long negotiations, we've worked out a deal where she'll keep up with Twitter for me as I dictate the messages. I want to thank you all for your incredibly kind words and prayers. You're not done with me just yet." John Dingell was 92 years old. Virginia's lieutenant governor, accused of sexual assault, continues to deny the claim. Democrat Justin Fairfax tells reporters today he is confident in the truth and believes he will have a chance to defend himself publicly. Meantime, Governor Ralph Northam continues to defy widespread calls for his resignation, but his long-term plans remain a mystery. Democrats launch a sweeping plan they say will transform the U.S. economy and fight climate change. The proposal was put forward by Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York and Senator Ed Markey of Massachusetts. At least 6 senators running for president in 2020 backed the so-called Green New Deal. U.S. humanitarian aid destined for Venezuela is sitting in a warehouse in neighboring Colombia. The supplies are available to those who can make the journey. Venezuela's opposition leader vows to deliver the aid to the people. But President Nicolas Maduro will not accept U.S. assistance, saying Venezuelans, quote, are not beggars. A top church leader in the country says the Vatican will not mediate between the two sides. Cardinal Porras says previous attempts by the Vatican to help in talks with Maduro had been met by mockery. At least 10 people are dead after a fire sweeps through a soccer team's complex in Brazil. The blaze tore through the practice facility for the youth squad of Flamengo, one of the country's most popular teams. It is likely those who died were players, but their names have not been released. A report says Vatican officials will meet next week to decide the fate of disgraced former Cardinal Theodore McCarrick. Reuters says McCarrick almost certainly will be dismissed from the priesthood. He would be the highest profile Catholic figure to be defrocked in modern times. McCarrick resigned from the College of Cardinals last year following allegations of sexual abuse. A religious community in France is weighing in after the Holy Father commented on sexual abuse within their congregation. The leadership for the Family of St. John put out a statement saying, quote, following Pope Francis' lead and in communion with him, they reaffirmed their clear resolve to eradicate any and all abusive situations. Alan Holdren is the EWTN Rome Bureau Chief. Alan, we've been following this story all week. On Tuesday, Pope Francis was asked a question about the sexual abuse of nuns. He referenced this case, admitting there was, quote, sexual slavery. The next day, the Vatican clarified those comments, saying it was, quote, an abuse of power. What is the religious order saying?
Well, in a statement, Wyatt, the community admitted that there were problems and says it took a proactive stance to prevent further abuse and to respond quickly and effectively to the cases of abuse that took place. The head of the Brothers of St. John revealed in 2013 that the community's founder had committed acts contrary to chastity with several adult women that he accompanied at the time. The St. John family says that it condemns all acts of sexual abuse and abuse of power committed by its founder. It also says that any other members responsible for abuse have been sanctioned or are in the process of being sanctioned right now.
Give us some more background here. Tell us about the order itself and where it stands with the church.
So, Wyatt, there are about 800 brothers and sisters associated with the community throughout the world. There are 80 sisters that are part of this community of contemplative sisters of St. John. The group says that they've consistently chosen to cooperate with the decisions that the church authorities made in 2009 and have enacted norms that were required at that time with regard to their government and the abuse of authority. To clarify one point that's been largely confused, Wyatt, in media reports, the Contemplative Sisters of St. John were never dissolved. What was dissolved was an offshoot of the sisters who left the original community.
Okay, so that's an important clarification. So, Alan, like you say, the order is cooperating with the authorities, as they say. So, but what is the order saying about the victims themselves?
Well, the brothers and sisters of the family of St. John said in that statement that they reaffirm their commitment to any person abused by a member of the religious family. They said, quote, "We're ready to listen to you and take action according to established norms." They also said that they're saddened at the abuses of women who dedicated themselves to God and that they're committed to rebuild and change what needs to be corrected. They also said that they're in complete collaboration with Rome and competent external assistance. They have a clear resolve to eradicate any and all abusive situations within their community.
It's pretty horrific to think about it, but so important that we bring it to light, and I know many people will be praying for those religious sisters. Alan Holdren, EWTN Rome Bureau Chief, thanks so much.
Thank you, Wyatt.
Coming up, Pope Francis honors the patron saint of victims of human trafficking. And analysis of the Pope's trip to the UAE from a former Vatican diplomat.
Specialmente di quanti sono prigionieri del crimine e del traffico.
Pope Francis says it's the duty of Christians to raise awareness of modern-day slavery. Today is the second International Day of Prayer and Awareness Against Human Trafficking. The Holy Father was speaking to the Galileo Foundation, a faith-based group which strives to eliminate human trafficking. Today is also the feast of St. Josephine Bakhita, the patron saint of trafficking victims. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. Cindy McCain apologizes for saying she stopped a case of human trafficking at the airport in Phoenix. The wife of late Arizona Senator John McCain alerted security last week after seeing a toddler with a woman of a different ethnicity. Police say they investigated and found no evidence of a crime. The long-term health care facility in Arizona where an incapacitated woman gave birth says it will shut down. Hacienda Healthcare is home to infants and young adults with intellectual disabilities. Late last year, a patient gave birth after being raped. Authorities charged a former nurse at the facility with sexual assault. Pope Francis' trip to the United Arab Emirates is being hailed as an important step in interfaith dialogue between Catholics and Muslims. Earlier this week, Lauren Ashburn spoke with Professor Francis Campbell, former British ambassador to the Holy See and former Deputy High Commissioner to Pakistan, about conditions for Christians in that country and his impressions of the Pope's historic visit to the Arabian Peninsula.
You were ambassador during the pontificate of Pope Benedict XVI. He tried to promote dialogue with Islam. This Pope, Francis, has followed in his footsteps with the trip to the UAE. Do you think that this trip, while significant, will make any lasting progress?
I think the photograph with the papacy is iconic in itself. And if you think back to John Paul II and some of those really iconic photographs, I think he was the first Pope that really in a media age communicated through a symbol and through a photograph. And I think seeing the Pope walking with the Crown Prince in Abu Dhabi, just off the plane on the Arabian Peninsula, I think there's very few of us that actually thought we would in our lifetime see such a photograph.
You spent time in Pakistan as a Catholic diplomat, Professor Campbell. I'd like to get your impressions of what's happening there now. We talk a lot about Asia Bibi and the case there. She was acquitted of blasphemy charges. Do you see that as a watershed moment for Pakistan?
I think it is a watershed moment, and it's a watershed moment for the population itself, because what you have is in essence, a debate on the modernity of the country. And the fact that Aissa Bibi, that two people gave their life in defense of Aissa Bibi. The first was Salman Taseer, the governor of Punjab, who was assassinated by one of his bodyguards, a practicing Muslim. The fact that he went into the prison, the fact that he said, this innocent woman needs to be released, somebody took it upon themselves to assassinate him, and that person was celebrated. And I think that was a real shock to the people of Pakistan. What you have in Pakistan vis-a-vis Christianity is not the same as you have in other parts of the world. There's discrimination, but actually there is freedom of religion. And if you look at the Pakistani constitution from the time of partition, where it was meant to be a pluralist state, where you have...
What year was this?
This was 1947.
Okay, and there is right now persecution, Christian persecution in much of the world, including in Pakistan. Why is it different there?
So it's different there because there is a Christian population. About 2% of the population are Christian. There's many Catholic schools. Benazir Bhutto herself went to a Catholic school, a former Prime Minister of Pakistan, one of the leaders of the Pakistan People's Party. She sent her children to a Catholic school. So there are priests and nuns, and there is a vibrant population in Pakistan. Albeit small, but there is a population in Pakistan of politicians and of leaders that want that vibrant presence because it speaks to the plurality of Pakistan. So there really is, it's a divided issue at the moment.
You work, Professor Campbell, at St. Mary's University in London. It's the oldest Catholic university in the UK. Before we go, what is the biggest challenge for Catholics' education, Catholic education and Catholics in England today?
Being distinctive. So the history of England and the history of education in England is complex. 26% of our children go to state-funded faith-based schools. About 10% of the total go to Catholic schools in England. This is the first time since the Reformation that we've had Catholic universities. We had them before the Reformation, but we now have them again.
Starting when?
Starting in 2014. So it's a new development for the church and it's a new development for the state.
And your role is key in that, I believe, and most likely promoting it.
Yes. So we have to promote something that's distinctive, and we're very conscious that what we're trying to do in the 21st century is something that evaded Blessed John Henry Newman in the 19th century, and that is to have a Catholic university. He tried in Ireland. We're now trying in London.
Many thanks for joining us. Former Ambassador Francis Campbell and now Vice Chancellor of St. Mary's University in London. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Lauren.
And our thanks to Lauren Ashburn for that interview. The name of a former Catholic bishop in West Virginia is being removed from a high school gymnasium. The gym at Wheeling Central Catholic High was named last spring for Bishop Michael Bransfield. He's at the center of a sexual assault investigation involving adults. Bransfield resigned as the head of the state's only diocese last year. Up next, we'll hear all about National Marriage Week.
La vita ha valore solo nel donarla.
Pope Francis says life only has value if we give it to others in love and truth. At his daily Mass at the Vatican, the Holy Father says life withers and dies when we focus only on ourselves. By putting others first, we can become great. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby, in for Lauren Ashburn. The Catholic bishops of Washington state say they support a proposed bill that would repeal the death penalty. This comes after the state Supreme Court ruled the death penalty unconstitutional last October. The bishops cited the Catholic Church's belief that every human life is sacred from conception until natural death. And that's not the only thing the bishops in the state of Washington are saying. To find out what the Archbishop of Seattle thinks, visit our partners at CatholicNewsAgency.com. The Archbishop of Philadelphia is encouraging Catholics across the country to celebrate the sacrament of matrimony. Archbishop Charles Chaput says everyone, married couples, clergy, consecrated, and single people, can all honor marriage. In a letter, the Archbishop, who chairs the Bishops' Conference Committee on Laity, Marriage, Family Life, and Youth, is encouraging parishes to, quote, focus on building a culture of life and love that begins with promoting and defending marriage and the family. His note comes as Americans are marking National Marriage Week USA, which is February 7th to the 14th. Joining us now is Sheila Weber, Executive Director of National Marriage Week USA. Sheila, welcome back to the broadcast. What is National Marriage Week?
National Marriage Week is February 7th to the 14th, and it's a campaign. It's a movement, it's a clearinghouse and a source of help. By that I mean it's a movement to stir marriage education all across the U.S. It's a clearinghouse. We have the only online national calendar where you can post a marriage event you're having or look for one near you. And it's a campaign for public education to get the word out why marriage is so beneficial. And lastly, a source of help. If you are struggling with your marriage or you know someone who needs help, there are resources at nationalmarriageweekusa.org.
What is it about marriage that's so important to a successful, thriving culture?
Well, it's especially important for the raising of children. We know research is clear that marriage gives children an environment where they have less teen pregnancy, less addiction, less trouble with the law, they perform better in school. Also, research is clear that married adults are happier and healthier. They live longer lives, and there are a lot of benefits, and I think we're in a day and age where the younger generation is a little bit afraid of the commitment, and we want to get the word out that marriage is beneficial for them.
It can also be beneficial economically, you say. You say that in the U.S., marriage drops the probability of child poverty by 82%. How are marriage and poverty connected?
Right. Well, there's also another statistic that we would have 25% less poverty today if we had the marriage rates that we'd had in 1970. There's a wonderful thing I call the success sequence, that if you graduate from high school and work full-time and postpone marriage and childbearing until after the age of 21, there's only a 2% chance that you'll end up in poverty. If you don't do those three things, there's a 77% chance of poverty. So a married household gives stability, tremendous financial stability, and as I'd said, a nurturing environment that children have more success.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm not married, but I certainly know that marriage doesn't come with an instruction booklet. What is it that society can do to help promote marriage in the culture?
I think to get the word out that there are ways to have better marriages and to improve the one you have, and for people not to give up. It's proven that for people who work through their conflict and go through the tough times and do the hard work, that 5 years later they are happy that they stayed together. So we would like for people to be encouraged that there are ways to recover from hardship or conflict, and in the long run, it's much better for them and for the longevity of their family.
Well, marriage is such an important institution and so foundational for our society. So we thank you so much for coming on and talking with us about it. Sheila Weber, Executive Director of National Marriage Week USA. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
And of course, National Marriage Week USA wraps up on Valentine's Day, which is next Thursday. And with that, we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Wyatt Goolsby. We'll be back on Monday with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night, and God bless.